Today is the second anniversary of the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Booster Course Pass, and throughout those 2 years of Nintendo reviving this now 11-year-old game, a lot has happened. But one of the more exciting aspects about it is what kind of courses we would get throughout the rest of the 5 waves. Perhaps the excellent GBA remakes or fan favorites like Waluigi Pinball and Maple Treeway? Of course, that aspect has since passed with not only the Prefix League affecting the prediction scene, but also the reality that the courses considered are only the ones that debuted and returned in Tour. With the DLC now done, I can say that while for the most part I'm pretty satisfied with the selection, there's a few choices here that doesn't sit well with me. And I'm pretty sure there are many others as well that feel the same way. I've seen a few videos even about fixing what the Booster Course Pass had, so why not take a gander at it? Yep, I'm reviving this series again, as much as I didn't intend on coming back to it. Just don't expect me to do a Mario Kart 7 version afterwards. In this video, I'll be attempting to fix the Booster Course Pass by either shifting course placements or removing them entirely with different ones. But before we get started, I'd like to address a couple of things. I'm still going to stick by Nintendo's rules and only include tracks that have appeared in Mario Kart Tour, since that's where the DLC mostly bases it off the most. Considering that, I'm also going to follow the guidelines set from the Prefix League, but it's not going to be exactly as it shows. After all, if Nintendo's going to break their own rules, then so shall I. 2. I'm not going to be shifting or removing the city tracks. The reason for being here is to preserve the tracks that Mario Kart Tour exclusively has, and as for their placements not being shifted, I just think that where they are placed now is good enough and doesn't need any adjustments. Sorry if you wanted New York Minute to be in the Moon Cup because Super Mario Odyssey reference. This also applies to the Nitro courses as well, although this one's more obvious since people really like these ones more than the city tracks. And 3, not that this will be brought up after this, but I'd have the visuals for all of the tracks to be on par with Base 8, or at the very least, close to what Riverside Park or SNES Bowser Castle 3 had. Just thought I'd mention that here so that no one in the comments say, actually, this version looks like utter shit. Now, with those guidelines set in stone, it's time to start all the way back in Wave 1 and see if we can fix the Booster Course Pass, or potentially ruin it further. I don't know, we'll see how it goes. Starting with Wave 1, the track selection that we have here is, well, not the greatest. It does have standout fan favorites with Coconut Mall and Ninja Hideaway, but it also has some notable duds like Tokyo Blur and Toad Circuit. Really, the track selection here is just full of strange choices. I mean, I still remember being surprised that Shroom Ridge of all courses managed to get into the DLC, but I still found many of them enjoyable. So for this rework, I decided to replace 2 tracks in Wave 1, those being Toad Circuit and Sky Garden. For Toad Circuit, this track is just very simple for it being the 50th track in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and comparing it to the rest of the other tracks in both the base game and DLC doesn't lend it any favors. For that, I decided to replace the track with, controversially, 3DS Mario Circuit. Now I hear you, why not Shy Guy Bazaar or Daisy Hills? Well, to be completely honest, as much as I would like to include either, I have a hunch that Nintendo intended there to be a basic circuit track for Wave 1, and if they really do intend on it, then why not choose the more interesting track of the two? It's not an outstanding track by any means, but it does have some standout moments like the cherry blossom trees and the spiral inside Peach's castle. Plus, it still keeps the amazing remix that Toad Circuit has, so at least that isn't gone. I don't know, it's more of a double-edged sword than anything, but I'd rather have an interesting circuit than a boring one. As for Sky Garden, well, it's no secret that the way it's been handled in both Tour and 8 Deluxe really isn't that great. It personally speaks out to me more considering that Sky Garden is one of my all-time favorite tracks in the series, so it really did hurt to see this GBA track be simplified to a shell of its former self, and many others expressed it as well, especially those that grew up in Super Circuit or Mario Kart DS. For that, I also decided to replace it. Luckily enough, Mario Kart Tour is the game that really gave the GBA tracks a lot of love, as there's a plentiful amount to choose from. However, most of them are simplified, so I have to keep that into consideration. The decision for the GBA replacement was surprisingly easy, as I went from my other favorite Super Circuit track, Cheap Cheap Island. Now, Cheap Cheap Island may not be in the same fan favorite status as Sky Garden, but at least to me, the way it's been handled in Tour isn't as bad as Sky Garden. It still has some semblance to the original layout, but with it being a lot easier this time, I think it fits Wave 1 perfectly well. Although in fairness, this track is a bit easier compared to the other Lightning Cup tracks in Super Circuit. Plus, it does add in a beach course to the DLC. I mean, I guess Los Angeles Labs technically is a beach course, but like, a small portion of it, you know, it's not completely... Regardless, Cheap Island would still make for a good choice. Not a fan favorite like Sky Garden, but with how that track turned out, yeah, it's probably for the best this one gets to set aside. And that concludes Wave 1, with Toad Circuit and Sky Garden being replaced with Mario Circuit and Cheap Island respectively. But we're not done yet, as we still have 5 more waves to go. Let's propel our way to Wave 2 and plug out any courses that I deem not fit. Compared to Wave 1, the track selection here this time is kinda better? I mean, we do have Mushroom Gorge and Waluigi Pinball, so that's cool, and I like the way Calamari Desert, Snowland, and Sydney Sprint turned out as well. But of course, we do have a couple of duds, and considering the rules that I have laid out, we can't really do much for New York Minute and Sky High Sunday, as much as I would like to give that track a layout change. Oh well, maybe another day. That only leaves us with... Mario Circuit 3. Seriously, Nintendo? Out of all the SNES Mario circuits, why did you choose this one? I mean, I guess there are some things going on unlike Mario Circuit 1, but it just feels really boring to play. That 90-degree turn isn't doing it for me either, so we're gonna have to replace it with a much better Mario Circuit. Obviously, I'm referring to Mario Circuit 2. Now, even though this track also doesn't offer any elevation changes like Mario Circuit 3, it does have a glider ramp with an additional shortcut to boot, so that automatically makes this one a viable candidate, and a much more interesting course to play on instead of the track that was probably added to cater towards Wii fans. Don't lie, you probably remember this track from Wii. And that's actually it. I found the Propeller Cup to be pretty good the way it is, so it doesn't need any additional changes other than probably changing Sky High Sunday's layout, so I guess we're rolling on to Wave 3. Hopefully the moon will shine with this one. Now this one is interesting. For Wave 3, this is where we'll start to see some notable changes for this rework, but how so? Well, let's take a look at the Rock Cup first, and while London Loop still gets to be the first track, I'm actually going to swap the places of both Boo Lake and Rock Mountain, with the former now being the third track and the latter being the second. Rock Mountain just seems a little easier compared to Boo Lake, so the decision to swap those tracks makes sense. Now the fourth course is where things start to become interesting, as while I do like Maple Treeway's inclusion, I'm actually going to be moving it towards Wave 4 and put Berry Mountain as the final track of the Rock Cup. This is for a few reasons. For one, later waves have towards Nitro courses be put as the final track in the first cup of the wave, which does make Berry Mountain a bit of an outlier. The second reason is to contribute to the Moon Cup, which I will go over now. Actually, before we even get to there, if you're concerned about Rock Mountain and Berry Mountain being in the same place, Mario Kart 7 literally has Luigi Raceway and Luigi's Mansion in the same cup. Checkmate. Anyways, moving on to the Moon Cup. The Moon Cup's courses mostly stay in the same place as they were originally, but since Berry Mountain no longer holds the third slot of the cup, I decided to bring one track back to its original place. I'm of course referring to Waluigi Stadium, which still fits as the penultimate track regardless of whether it stays in Wave 3 or 4. If you're curious about what placement Maple Treeway is going to be for Wave 4, well, you'll see soon enough. Wave 3 overall turned out to be a bit different than I imagined, with some courses being rearranged and Waluigi Stadium being back to its original spot. With the top row of cups done, let's head on down to Wave 4 and see if we can improve it, or keep it as it was before. Yeah, there's no fruit or boomerang jokes, sorry. Wave 4s were many consider it to be one of the best waves of the Booster Course Pass, and I mean, they aren't wrong. With tracks like DK Summit, Yoshi's Island, and Singapore Speedway especially, Wave 4 stands out as one of the most consistent waves of the DLC, but as with the others, it isn't perfect, and we aim to change that. Or at least, just the Boomerang Cup, because the Fruit Cup doesn't really have anything worth changing. Most of, if not all the tracks there are pretty fun in their own right, even Amsterdam Drift, which I've since grown a slight appreciation for. The Boomerang Cup may have Bangkok Rush and Singapore Speedway, but what about the other two? Well, remember what I said about Maple Treeway moving to Wave 4? Well, this is where it's going to be staying at. Now yeah, this does look very out of place considering it's spring by the time Wave 4 released, but I have some plans for Wave 6, and Maple Treeway simply wouldn't make it as possible, so there's that. Besides, having it and DK Summit in the safe waves feels like heaven. Or maybe that's just me considering I like these two the most as they're my favorite Wii tracks. As for DS Mario Circuit, while I did like the way it turned out, its inclusion alone just caused a bunch of controversy, and I would know. I've seen it happen. For that, as well as another course that I'll mention later, I decided to move it, or rather its prefix, to Wave 5, and in its place is one of the few courses that isn't part of the prefix league. I mean, if Nintendo's gonna break their own rule, then so be it. But what track do I add? Well, how about one last hurrah to Mario Kart 64? I was kinda disappointed that it only got 2 tracks in the Booster Course Pass, as much as I agreed that the game already had enough representation as is. But even then it's messy. Ignoring that, I've had a hard time deciding on either Frappe Snowland or Koopa Troopa Beach, as both courses are pretty simple. After thinking about it, I ultimately went with Koopa Troopa Beach. I did initially plan to include Frappe Snowland, but we already have DK Summit in Wave 4, and plus, Koopa Troopa Beach not only allows more beach courses in the Booster Course Pass, but it also fits Wave 4 well, seeing as it's a simple course in the first half of the second row, as well as being a Mushroom Cup track. Also, it's kind of been referenced in Sunshine Airport, so hey, there's a full circle right there. Wave 4 turned out to be even more surprising than Wave 3, as even though the Fruit Cup hasn't changed, the Boomerang Cup certainly did, with Koopa Troopa Beach and Maple Treeway taking the spots of Waluigi Stadium and DS Mario Circuit. With that, we're almost done with this journey. With 2 more waves to go, let's continue forth and soar into Wave 5. To be completely honest, Wave 5 is more identical to Wave 4 in terms of the changes I made to it. In fact, let me just get this out of the way. The Feather Cup remains the same as it was before. Yes, the same. I actually decided to keep Moonview Highway as I found it to be pretty good in the Booster Course Pass, even if I wish the cars moved a little faster as they were in Wii. And speaking of Wii, let's address the Cherry Cup. In my honest opinion, this cup is one of the weaker ones in the DLC. I did find myself enjoying both Los Angeles Labs and Vancouver Velocity, but Sunset Wilds and Koopa Cape are... well, the latter is just about what you expect for Koopa Cape after Mario Kart 7 flooded it, and the former, we all know what happened to it. So, how am I going to go about this? Well, for starters, let's focus on Sunset Wilds. Much like Sky Garden, this track has also been simplified in layout, but it somehow got the worst end of the stick by having its defining feature removed entirely. Needless to say, it received a lot of backlash from fans, and while there would be mods later down that fixed the missing setting sun, it wouldn't fix the layout. Once again, we have a track to replace. But at this point, our options suddenly become small with the amount of GBA courses left. I had to look at the options available, and after some consideration, I ultimately decided on GBA Luigi Circuit. Yep, Golden's back at it again with his unusual picks. But to be fair, Luigi's Circuit has always been one of the better circuit tracks in this series, with its more challenging layout and unique airstrip atmosphere. Plus, Luigi hasn't had a single track to his name in the entirety of the Booster Course Pass, so why not toss this one here? It may not be as exciting as Bowser Castle 4 or Yoshi Desert, but I feel like it gets the job done regardless. Oh, and if you're wondering about the music, well, let's just say that in this hypothetical scenario, it would receive a remix that follows closer to the final version we got in Super Circuit. The same goes to Waluigi Pinball, albeit a more techno-inspired remix, but you get the idea. Now, as for Koopa Cape, I still see some general positive reception for this track, no part because of its fan favorite status, but it's no secret that this isn't nearly as good as the original. The fact that this version is obviously based on the tour model doesn't really help with its orange mountains, underwater section that removes the challenge, which also adds in half-pipes and weird anti-gravity, amongst other smaller things. It doesn't help that out of the Wii courses, Koopa Cape unfortunately got the short end of the stick in terms of its future remakes. And for that, I decided to give it a break in spite of its fan favorite nature. Plus, I'm limiting the amount of Wii tracks back to 6, so what takes the place of Koopa Cave then? How about another fan favorite? One that's been snubbed in its place for the DLC and has been heavily requested since the start? I think you know what it is. Yep, I'm bringing in the beloved DS fan favorite, Airship Fortress. Even after the DLC's been said and done, I still can't believe Nintendo didn't include Airship Fortress. I mean, it's one of the most popular courses in DS alongside Luigi's Mansion and Delfino Square. And while I wasn't disappointed at the DS selection we got, seeing Waluigi Pinball be the only fan favorite included amongst the others just didn't sit well with me. So I decided to fix that and include it here. Not only does it send Mario Kart DS off on a much higher note, but it also substitutes SNES Bowser Castle 3's original spot as well, seeing as it was originally meant to be in the Cherry Cup. Also, as you can probably guess, DS Mario Circuit has essentially been replaced. It's hard for me to let this one go, but at the very least, we got ourselves a track that would have sent off DS on a much better note. So yeah, Wave 5 turned out to be more similar to Wave 4 in terms of how I went about in changing it. I'm pretty sure this one might be more controversial, with me including Luigi's Circuit over Yoshi Desert, but to be fair, Wave 5 itself was controversial at face value. But enough about that, we have one last wave to tackle, so let's race our way to the finish line with Wave 6. Out of all the waves for this rework, Wave 6 has got to be the most different out of any, and for the first time since Wave 3, we have 2 cuts for us to change again, so that'll be exciting. Starting at the Acorn Cup, the track selection here seemingly doesn't look as bad from a glance, and while I would have preferred Dino Dino Jungle over DK Mountain still, I do recognize that it's a fan favorite, so it'll stay. But you know what won't stay? Daisy Circuit. Now, even as your local Daisy Circuit fan, I still think the track's inclusion is more strange than anything. I mean, a circuit track in the last wave? Come on, Nintendo. No matter how much you love catering towards the Mario Kart Wii fans, I'm sure Dry Dry Ruins would have sufficed more than Daisy Circuit, and it's this track in Rosalina's Ice World that caused Wave 6 to have a very strange course selection, far removed from what it previously had before. But as I said before, I'm limiting the Wii tracks to 6, so as much as I would love to add Dry Dry Ruins, I wanted to prioritize one certain track for this wave. But before we get to that, let's see what I did for the Acorn Cup. I ultimately scrapped Daisy Circuit and moved Rosalina's Ice World a cup earlier. I could have replaced the track with Wario's Shipyard, but Rosalina's Ice World does fill in the snow gap that's been present since Wave 2, and besides, Wario has more than enough courses to his name as is. So with that, we move on to our final cup for the video, the Spiny Cup. In my opinion, the Spiny Cup has to be one of my favorite cups in not only the Booster Course Pass, but Mario Kart 8 Deluxe as a whole. It has one of the best city tracks, a really stellar SNES remake, and of course, the very famous Wii Rainbow Road to cap everything off. Now, with me moving Rosalina's Ice World to the Acorn Cup, we only really have one more track left for the Spiny Cup, and to you Mario Kart Tour fans, I think you know what this track is. In the same vein as Airship Fortress, I still couldn't believe that Nintendo admitted Piranha Plant Pipeline for the Booster Course Pass, making it the only tour track to not appear in it altogether, not counting remix tracks or the 2 battle courses it had. This one is especially surprising since up until that point, many believed that Nintendo would preserve all their tour courses in this DLC. Knowing that this track would only be available for 2 weeks a year didn't feel right, so I put it as the second slot of the Spiny Cup. Now, this may look weird, especially after I gave Merry Mountain the same treatment as the other Nitros, but this track simply wouldn't look right if it was the penultimate or final track of the Spiny Cup. Besides, I actually like the way it's placed here as it symbolizes towards final courses in both the city and Nitro tracks respectively, and from the looks of it with handled care, it might have still played fine in 8 Deluxe. Yeah, sure, you could argue that Piranha Plant Pipeline and Piranha Plant Co. share the same name, but remember, in Japan this course was called Warp Canyon. Or Pipe Canyon? I'm pretty sure it's one of them, but I still don't know why Nintendo changed the name to be Piranha Plant Pipeline, but whatever. With that all said and done though, I believe we've concluded all that we can do in fixing the booster course pass. This journey has certainly been an interesting ride. While not all the cups have been tampered with, I think it really just goes to show just how strong some of them are with what Nintendo provided, if it's anything to go by with things like the Fruit and Feather Cup. I really enjoyed reworking the Booster Course Pass, and even if the selection I made isn't perfect, I encourage you guys in the comments to suggest how you would change the DLC. Hell, maybe even include tracks that weren't in Tour. But before I end this video, I'd like to show the changes I made to the selection one more time, as well as state something during it. Now, I didn't intend on coming back to this small series, seeing as I didn't intend on making another one after the Wii video, but I've never had more fun changing the courses here than I had for the last two. Seriously, this might be one of my favorite reworks on the channel. Despite all of that, I'm still keeping true to my word. I will be continuing this series after this, as I'd rather pursue other topics that are more interesting than just replacing Mario Circuit 3 again. You can view this as a sort of finale to this trilogy of videos, so there's that at least. But with all of that, we finally come to the end of this video. Thank you all so much for watching it. Even after 2 years, I still couldn't believe that the Booster Course Pass happened. It's genuinely one of my favorite Nintendo DLCs ever. And even after the drama and controversy it caused, I'm still pretty satisfied with the end result that we did get, even if I didn't get my Mushroom City or Airship Fortress in. But with that said, leave down your comments on this video, consider joining my Discord server if you can, and as always, remember that Stu cares about you. What's that, Stu? The characters? Oh yeah, the Booster Course Pass adds in 8 characters. There.